Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here, and welcome to a new crafting episode. In this week's episode, I am going to be painting up this collection of dungeon tiles that I created. If you watched the previous video, you saw how these were made. They consist of a bunch of randomly cut stones, in quotes, that were glued onto chipboard, and they give it this nice random pattern. They're also a little uneven, but not so uneven that a miniature can't, stand on it without tipping over. So in this week's episode, what I'm going to do is get these painted. First step is to get them black bombed. Then I'll be applying the paint to them, some sort of color scheme, and then wrapping it up with a coat of Mod Podge to seal the paint and protect these so that they will last me a while. Let's get to the tabletop and let's get started on this project. Okay, now when I'm painting tiles, especially any project really that has gaps between it, I like to water down my black paint just so it runs down in there, but you don't want to water it down so much that it becomes soupy. So what I do is I usually squeeze out a little bit of black paint into a plastic cup like this, and you want to do this, don't squeeze the whole thing out, you just never know how much paint you're going to use. What I do is I just add a little water to it, not much, and stir it up a little bit. You still want it to be thick, and so far so good. I didn't add too much water. It's a little tricky sometimes. It's just something that comes with experience. When in doubt, add less water and then add a little bit more as you need it. But that is going to do exactly what I need it to do. Now, I'm not going for perfection here. It doesn't have to fit in every little crack. The main thing is I'm trying to cover up the pink. The pink has got to go away so that you don't see it. But by the time these things are fully painted, much of the color is going to, if there's any pink that's visible, it's going to blend with the grays and whatever other colors that you put. It'll be very hard to spot a single, it'll be hard to spot the pink among all the other colors. But if you find that you missed a spot, you can always add a little wash, drip some wash down in between the cracks if it really bothers you. But in my experience, I typically find that if you use a little bit of water in your black paint and you just dab down in there, it will get down in there. It'll run. It'll sink down in there. And then, of course, you can just use your brush to just sort of... You're going to damage a brush, by the way. If you get a big bristle brush like this, by the time I'm done with this brush is going to be toast. But that's okay. It will have served its purpose. I never buy expensive brushes just because of this reason. I tend to dab like I'm doing here and just to get it down in there. But I can see a little bit of pink, but hopefully the liquid paint will still run down in there. Now they're also probably going to curve just a little bit as the paint dries. They may curve up. You can bend them back into shape, or you can do what Bill Wylock suggests and paint the other side. After this paint dries, you can flip them over and paint them black on the other side, or you could apply some glue or Mod Podge, whatever works for you. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to time lapse this, and I'm not going to make you watch me paint all 20, 30 pieces of this. So the next, after the time lapse ends, what I'll do next is I'll be applying some specific colors to the stones that I want to see. I don't want it to be all the same gray. You could do that. It's not gonna, it would look fine, but I want to go with a different paint scheme for these, just something a little different. When I first started making my my dungeon tiles, I used to do dry brushing and then sponging. I would dry brush light gray over dark gray, and then I would take a sponge and I would dab the stone to give it that stone appearance. And I still like doing that, but I'm going to try something a little different with these. And so once these are all dry, this is going to take a while. Once these are all dry, we'll get started on the color scheme. So let's go to time lapse. All right, I have got them all painted up, painted, black bombed, everything, even the really big one here. So the next step is I'm going to get these covered in gray, a base gray. Bill, my friend Bill, you know him as Wylock, he had a video, I don't know, maybe it was a month ago, maybe a little longer. He made some new tiles, and he used a soldering iron to create the cracks or the stonework that I've done using individually cut pieces of foam. Well, Bill had a really interesting paint scheme that I'm going to kind of riff on. I liked what he did there, and I'll put a link to his video in the video description below. I'm going to follow his recipe, so to speak, for mine, but I'm going to make some alterations in some of the specific colors that I use for my stone. But I liked how he did it, and I also liked the wash that he applied afterward. So let me point the camera down to the tabletop. I'm going to get these things base coated in gray, and then we'll start doing the individual stones. Now, once again, I'm not going to make you watch me coat every one of these in dark gray, but I'm going to be using Craftsmart graphite, and the reason I chose this is it's a darker gray, and I have a lot of them. I didn't want to make a special run to the craft store for a specific dark gray, and I have a lot of tiles to paint. I know I can get these if I run out, but I've got 6 bottles here, so I'm hoping that they'll hold out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be doing what's called a dry brushing, and I'm going to get the brush good and covered in the paint, and then brush it off on the cardboard, and then just really quick give it a good once over, just so that the black grooves are visible, or the gaps between the stones. And I'm not going really heavy on this, just about like that, if you can see that. What else do I need to let you know about this? The paint is a little wet. That's because I keep the brush dipped in some water when it dries out. I'll get it back in there. But this is not going to take an exceeding amount of time. As you can see, I just put some gray on there and then flip it around, get a side, and there you go. So I've got 34 tiles to do. I'm going to go ahead and head to the time lapse, and we'll let these dry afterwards, and then we'll get started on the individual stones. All right, now that I have the tiles base coated in gray, I'm going to use a few different shades of gray to paint individual stone tiles. Not all of them, but I'll have to just play it by ear. Again, this is sort of an art, not a science. And what I do is I've got a light gray here and a slate gray, which to me it looks like a middle of the road gray, if I can get any out. And then the graphite, which is the darker. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of graphite in each one of these, just to darken it up just a hair. And then I'm just going to paint individual tiles. I need to darken that just a little bit more. Maybe another dot or two. And again, this is going to be based on what you want from your tiles. You don't have to match yours exactly as mine, obviously. I thought about putting some green in there, like some slime, or I guess maybe mold or whatever. But I'm gonna wait and see how this turns out. Now, I'm not being neat about this. Obviously, you can be as technical about it as you want. And I don't really have a pattern here. I'm just sort of picking stones out. And I'm going to leave the big ones the darker gray, because I think if they're too much of a contrast in terms of the gray, too much light, it might not look right. So, and again, all I'm doing here is just running the brush over the smaller bricks, just trying to pull some different colors out. And I'm going to change this up too. So I'm going to, based on this one, it will tell me how many I need to paint on the smaller ones. So this is all I'm going to do on these bigger ones. So given that there's 4 of these, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, roughly 12 in here. I'm going to do 3 on this one. So we'll go 1. And you try to rotate the bricks like I'm doing here, just so you get a mix of directions. I don't want all the bricks going in one direction. That will be too obvious. And I'm doing these, like I said, I'm doing these all one, and then I'll go back and do a different shade of gray, and we'll see how that looks. 1, 2, maybe 4 on this one. There we go. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not going to sit there and make you watch me do this, so I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse this. So sit back and you can watch me paint individual stones if you like. Okay, now that my tiles are painted, at least the stonework is painted, I'm up in the air about this, but I'm going to trust Bill, because what he did next was he lightened the entire tile by applying like a khaki dry brush, a very light dry brush. I can't remember what he used, but I'm using parchment. It's a light color. And I do agree with him that I think this will lighten everything up and get it to a point where it sort of blends together before I put the dark wash on it. So I've got to be very careful here. I do not want to mess up what I've already done. So I'm going to load this brush up and then basically get the paint off. And that's kind of hard with this cheap brush. I may have to switch to a different one. And then I'm going to rotate the piece around and just give it a real, and actually, Bill, I'll give you points. I can already tell it's doing what I want it to do. It is lightening the tile a little bit. The wash is going to take it down a bit. Oh, yeah, that really... Yeah, points, Bill. You win this round. That really sort of blends those harsh colors together. Now, on this video screen, I don't know if you're going to be able to tell like I can, but yeah, that's... That's a good idea. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'll time lapse a little bit of this, and then I'll show you the final product before I apply the wash. Okay, now for the wash, Bill used a 10-to-1, 1 to paint, 10 parts water. So I'm gonna mix this up and see. It's just hard to judge, but gonna see what I can do here. I'm using a sponge. I just think it'll be a little easier to get this covered. I'm not using any kind of flow accelerant. I probably could, but I think this is going to be thin enough that it's going to fill down in the cracks and darken any areas that I may have missed when I gave it the black bomb. All right, let's try one. So that's still pretty thick. Mix it up really good. You don't want any paint going on. You want it watered down paint for the wash, but no thick sludge. I think that's what I've got here. Now, washes always appear a little darker when you apply them before they dry. So just beware that it may look a little dark when you do. And yeah, it looks very dark. As a matter of fact, it's so dark it's covering the colors that I applied. But trust me, it's going to pop out. And all I'm doing is just giving them a good wipe with the, you don't want it soaking. So what I'll do in a moment is I'll go back with another sponge and just pull some of the liquid off that's pooling, because you don't want it pooling. You definitely want it drying over all the bricks, but not so much that you've got a pool of black paint sitting there. So I'm just going to apply this real quick, and then we'll run a dry sponge over it to pull up any excess. All right, so I have another sponge here. So I'm just going to, there we go. And I'm going to do it in a downward direction. I definitely want the colors to come through that I applied. Okay. Now I'm only doing this to a handful at first, just to see what it looks like. I'm going to let this wash dry really well and see if I like it. If I don't, I can lighten the wash by adding a little more water. The other thing is I can always go back and redo these tiles if I don't like the way they look. But I'm going to let these dry, and we're going to see how they look compared to the non-washed version. And if I like what I see, I'll continue and finish up with the rest. All right, they are done. I am quite pleased. I'm not sure how well this will turn out, but as you can see, all the bright colored stones that I painted, they're muted. Here's the big one. Let me show you the big one. This one's, oh, I just love how these turned out. They're dark. The wash did lighten quite a bit, but not as much as I thought, but that's okay because I typically I prefer darker tiles. Now, one thing you may have noticed, my tiles are not gridded. There's not those 1-inch grids. They're very random. There's a reason for that. I tend to play a lot more war games than I do RPGs, and I have plenty of RPG gridded tiles and mats that I can put out and things like that. What I don't have are dungeon tiles for some of the newer war games that I'm playing, like 5 Leagues from the Borderland. If you are not familiar with this game, it has just come out, the version 3? I can't remember. I think it's version 3. It's called 5 Leagues from the Borderland. It's from the same writer as 5 Parsecs from Home. If one or neither of those are familiar to you, it's a solo war game, solo fantasy RPG, the Borderlands version, and you basically create a party. You have classes, you go up against monsters, you explore. It is a very, very complex and detailed book with lots of random charts and tables that allow you to roll up things that happen as you adventure. It's solo, and it's really one of the cooler games that I have discovered recently, along with another one called Lasting Tales. I would have been just as happy as can be with just one fantasy war game that can be played solo, but now I've got 2, Lasting Tales and 5 Leagues from the Borderland, and both of them have instances where I'm going to need dungeon tiles. So part of my reason for making these was I needed something that did not have a grid that would go along with some of the games that I'm playing now. So I hope you'll give these a chance. Like I said, Bill did his with a grid, and he created the stone with a soldering iron by melting the foam. They turned out great. I'll put a link, as I said, in the video description below, and you can check it out. But I did these by hand by cutting, oh man, there's got to be, I mean, I'm guessing maybe 1,000, maybe more, tiles cut from foam, all various sizes. As you can see, it's pretty flat, but because I textured them, and some of them may have been actually glued the wrong way, there is an unevenness to it, which adds to the three-dimensional aspect of it. On the tabletop, it looks really cool. And my 11-year-old son came down just recently and looked at him, and his eyes got real big. He's like, "Are those for us?" I've been playing a D&D game for him and 5 of his friends. I've been the DM, so I might get to use them. They tend to like the grid because they know how to move. But anyway, I definitely hope you give this a shot. Whether you use Bill's version by burning the stonework in with like a hot iron or a soldering iron, or if you choose my method of cutting the individual stones and gluing them on. This wild, random look, it's hard to match. I mean, I started out, as I said earlier, I started out doing like grids. You know, I'd cut a line, 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 and make a brick pattern. And then I would stamp it with a sponge to give it like this textured stone look. I've moved beyond that now. I really, a while back, I did a diorama that used this kind of thing for not just the structure but the floor, and I really, really liked how it turned out, and I've been meaning to make some dungeon tiles using that, so they're done. All right, that is all I have for this video. You may have also noticed that I did not coat them in Mod Podge. I didn't want to delay this video, and I found out I can't find my Mod Podge anywhere. So I'm going to have to go buy a big thing of it and coat these, and I do plan on doing it because if you're not careful, this is still foam, and it can tear or rip and expose the pink. So by coating them in Mod Podge, I'm hoping to give them a little bit more endurance, where if they drop or if somebody grabs it wrong with a fingernail or something, it's not gonna ruin the effect. But I do not have any Mod Podge, or at least I can't find it, so I've got to go buy some. All right, that's all I have for this week. I will be back next Wednesday with a new crafting video. That one is probably going to be a sci-fi element. I've got something that I'm working on, and I think I'm going to finish it in time to get that video up next week. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to see your take on it. If you want to share some pictures, you can share them over at the Tabletop Engineer Facebook page, or you can post them on the Tabletop Crafters Guild page. Either way, if you do decide to make some of these, I'd love to see them, and I'm sure other people would as well. All right, that's all I got. This is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Everybody, take care.